Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We are, of course, going to be looking into another unsolved mystery, but we've also got some developments on a case that I've covered previously. And I think for this episode in particular, the case of Susan Ledyard, the developments that we're talking about in the case of Paige Johnson might help lift the spirits of the family of Susan Ledyard. You know, these families are stuck in these terrible situations. I say that almost on every single episode, but just on this constant hunt, this constant search, Susan's case is very tough to understand right from the start. And I know we're going to refer to maps quite a bit on this one, but this screenshot has really been just grabbing my attention as I've been looking into this whole thing. And you can tell here, there's a house. This is where Susan lived. Here is where her car was found. This is Brandywine Creek, and down here is where her body would be recovered. And I'm still wondering if there's something about these points that can help us understand this case much better. And we're going to look into that as we get through all the details. But before we jump into Susan's case full bore, I want to start with an update on Paige Johnson's case. This is one that we covered earlier this year. I'll have a link to it in the description box below if you're not familiar with this case. There's a significant development. It's kind of something we were already thinking when I did the coverage originally, but it looks like we're finally having some action from law enforcement on that thought. The last person believed to be with a Northern Kentucky teenager before she disappeared in 2010 has been indicted. Jacob Bumpus was indicted on charges of abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence on Tuesday in connection to the death and disappearance of Paige Johnson. Now, just trying to parallel this to Susan's story, I know her family doesn't want to hear, you got to go through 10 years of this, but I'm seeing comments from them where people are letting them know sometimes the wait for justice is substantial. As a matter of fact, a family member of Christy Marac even reached out to them, which that's a case that took a very long time to solve and a significant development in DNA to solve. Sometimes you do have to wait for these cases to be solved. I'm hoping that they're not going to have this kind of wait, but even if there is, sometimes that light at the end of the tunnel takes you a while to get to, but just know that it's there and know that every day is bringing you closer to it. And that's exactly what we have going on in this case with Paige Johnson. His phone communicated with a tower that is a mile or two from where her body was found. If I remember correctly, I think it was about 1.5 miles, which certainly put it in the perimeter for the cell tower coverage. Bumpus is being held without bond at the Clermont County Jail. Because Johnson's cause of death has yet to be determined, no homicide charges have been filed yet. The prosecutor says that does not mean more charges are out of the question, though. So essentially, there's a challenge here because obviously they found her body, they know she's dead, but they couldn't determine what exactly happened to her. It sounds like now they've got the pieces to at least prove he was in the area. We know that he was with her leading up to that. He's at least responsible for trying to hide the fact that she had passed. And they're going to run those charges. And then hopefully in the discovery process, while they're investigating and trying to tighten all that up, who knows, maybe they'll find some additional information and they can bring in the other charges that it sounds like would be appropriate in this case, which would be a homicide charge. What does this mean for families when they have a development like this? Donna Johnson, Paige's mom, said she was filled with joy when she heard Bumpus had been arrested. I knew from that moment, Johnson said, the guilt on his face. And she's talking about very early on. She always thought that he had something to do with it. As a matter of fact, we covered that pretty strongly in the episode of BrainScratch. She said today is the first day she's been happy since Paige vanished. And here is a photo of her. So I hope we continue to see strong developments on this case and hopefully some bigger charges come with this. But let's go ahead and continue on to the case of Susan Ledyard. This takes place in Wilmington, Delaware. Wilmington is the largest and most populous city in the U.S. state of Delaware. It lies at the confluence of the Christina River and Brandywine River near where the Christina flows into the Delaware River. And obviously, I don't always tell you about the rivers in the area, but this kind of plays a key point in today's case. As of the 2019 United States Census estimate, the city's population is over 70,000 people. Now, I've talked about this on the channel before too. Sometimes the best way to learn about the victims in these cases is the obituaries, and this is a very well-written one. Let's learn about Susan Morrisey Ledyard. Susan was born in Westchester, Pennsylvania. She was the wife of Benjamin Ledyard. She loved him and, in turn, was loved dearly. Ben and Susan made their home in Wilmington, Delaware. Susan is a graduate of Upland Country Day School, the Tatnall School, Georgetown University, and San Francisco State University, where she received a master's degree in education. She taught English for a year in the former Czechoslovakia and later at Skyline High School in Oakland, California. After returning to the Delaware Valley, Susan began teaching language arts at Academy Park High School in Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania. She taught there for the last 13 years. Obviously, someone that loved education and not only getting it for herself, but sharing it with other people. I've seen a lot of comments about how she really took on the challenge of trying to motivate children that she was working with if they weren't really motivated to learn about English. She really tried to help them find the spark and enjoy that process. Susan was a gifted teacher, respected by her peers, loved by her students. She was a master of the English language and a voracious reader. Ever the bookworm, she combined that with a love of the outdoors. Nothing made her happier than sitting on the Stone Harbor beach with a good book. Susan was a thinker, a debater, and a warrior for the rights of all people. She was also a daughter, sister, spouse, aunt, and proud stepmom. Her love for her family and friends ran deep. They then note down here that they would like donations in her name made to the ACLU of Delaware. So once again, just showing that this is someone that was really into people's rights, and just someone that apparently really, really loved the written word and sharing that with other people. Let's start with our first article over at patch.com. Delco English teacher found dead in creek. Delco actually stands for Delaware County, which is in Pennsylvania. I know she lives in Delaware, but she's actually very close to the border. It seems like she just drives across into the different state to go to work. This article is from July 29th, 2019. Police said Susan M. Ledyard, 50, of Wilmington, Delaware, was found dead in Brandywine Creek in the area of the Church Street Bridge in Wilmington at about 8:58 a.m. on July 23rd. I'm seeing some varying times on that. I think it's actually a little bit earlier, but we'll cover that as we keep going. Ledyard was an English teacher at Academy Park High School in the Southeast Delco School District. She had been with the district since 2006. The Southeast Delco school community is deeply saddened by the death of Susan Ledyard, the district said in a statement. She was an excellent teacher and had a great impact on the many students that she taught. She provided leadership for Academy Park in areas of reading instruction and English preparation for college-bound students. Over here at dsp.delaware.gov, we get an official update. DSP is actually for the Delaware State Police. Delaware State Police conducting death investigation, and this was posted September 18th, 2019, so a little bit after. There is an earlier post that they made, but they basically didn't even have her identity in that post, so this is the second one that they release that comes out in September. The Delaware State Police are continuing to actively investigate the death of 50-year-old Susan M. Ledyard of Wilmington and are asking for the public's help in furthering the investigation. Okay, so here we get into the details. On Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019, at approximately 7:39 a.m., Susan Ledyard was discovered deceased in the Brandywine River in the area of Northeast Boulevard within the city of Wilmington. Upon being recovered from the river, Susan was turned over to the Division of Forensic Science to determine the cause and manner of her death. At approximately 8:54 a.m., on this same date, troopers responded to Walker's Mill Road in the area of the Rising Sun Lane Bridge for the report of a suspicious vehicle. Upon arrival, they located an unoccupied black 2016 Honda Civic, which came back registered to Susan Ledyard. This location, where the vehicle was located and where the Rising Sun Lane Bridge spans the Brandywine River, is approximately 3 miles upriver from where Susan's body was recovered. Through various investigative leads and measures, investigators have been able to create a timeline of Susan's activities on July 23rd. However, a gap exists between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Detectives are asking that anyone who believes that they may have seen Susan during this 4-hour time frame or may have any information regarding this case to please come forward. And of course, we've got contact information in the description box below if you do have information about this. So reading a release like this, I think there's one thought that most of us would have, and that would be, was there something going on in her life? Did she want to end her own life for some reason? Did she drive to this particular bridge, park her car nearby, jump in the water from there, and that was it? Maybe that was the intent. Maybe that's what this was supposed to look like, but there are some really challenging issues with that view, and we're going to get to that as we continue. So let's jump to the next article over at WDEL.com. Delaware State Police don't believe woman found in Brandywine Creek ended her own life. And this is posted also in September, and of course they've got a photo of the map here. So why don't they believe it? Susan Ledyard's younger brother, John Morrisey Jr., called her a superstar and a tough genius. We know that she is gone, but we're asking for your help because we simply don't know how Susan died, said Morrisey Jr. At a news conference on Wednesday, September 18th, Delaware State Police divulged that Ledyard's body was discovered with visible injuries, but the exact manner and cause of death remains to be determined. Toxicology reports are also still pending. Now, once again, even if this is a case where she might have ended her own life, if you jump from a bridge and if there's some rocks along the way in the path of travel in the water, couldn't you get some visible injuries from that? Yes. I believe they're concerned because the types of visible injuries are not lining up with that in a pretty significant way. However, they're not very clear about what they're seeing in the injuries that's leading them to believe that this isn't as it seems. Video surveillance cell phone records helped police piece together a partial timeline of Susan Ledyard's activities. We know that Susan was active on her cell phone throughout the night, texting and calling friends up until 2:45 a.m., said Detective Dan Grassi with Delaware State Police. At 3:02, Susan Ledyard's car left her home on Riverview Avenue in Wilmington, and 2 minutes later arrived on Walker's Mill Road where her car would remain. But between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., the timeline gets fuzzy. We were able to confirm that Susan was active for the next few hours, but we do not know her whereabouts during that time frame, and we don't know what caused her to leave her residence, said Detective Grassi. So this is pretty interesting. How would they know that she was still active for the next few hours? Possibly related to her cell phone. We've had them already mention that they're kind of using surveillance video and cell phones to piece together this timeline. Could that show? But even if you're getting that information from a cell phone, that only means the phone was active for those few hours. Do they have something better in terms of understanding that she was actually still active from between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m.? Police don't believe Susan Ledyard entered Brandywine Creek in the area where the car was parked. Now, that statement is the one that when I started looking into this case, I went, hold on a second. What? This is really not making sense. What are they talking about? How would they know that she didn't enter it there? Just because she's found 3 miles south, down the river. I've looked into other cases where bodies have traveled way farther than that. So what's the assumption? Between Rising Sun Lane and Northeast Boulevard, there are numerous obstructions in the water, such as dams, bridge piers, and areas of shallow water and exposed rocks, noted the detective. They said that her text communications showed no cause for alarm, and her family called her a night owl, saying it wasn't unusual for her to be on her phone late into the evening. Particularly, keep in mind, this is in July. She's on summer break from school, so it seemed like she was someone that actually enjoyed kind of when the summer would hit, she would stay up and, have a glass of wine and chat with her friends, stay on the phone until all hours of the night. So that is apparently not a very strange evening for her. And it looks like her communication was one of those kind of normal evenings here. Back to the point about the obstructions in the water, I've actually looked a lot at maps and satellite views on this to try to see what they're talking about. So here we've got the point marked where the car is parked, which is really kind of interesting in itself as well. Here's just a screenshot of it. It's not even a through road. It looks like it's a private driveway, and there's a gate here that closes it off. So her vehicle being parked here, I believe that's what tipped them off so quickly the next morning, because whoever works or lives back here was probably trying to come out to the main road, and they said, hey, there's a Honda Civic that's blocking my way. Call that in and let's get that towed. So I think that's what tipped everything off. When I look at the intent and I kind of look at this area around here, I'm really struck by someone that wants to drive down here and wants to park. And let's say if you were just coming here to hang out on the bridge, you just wanted to look at the water or something like that. There is nowhere for you to park in this immediate area. This little offshoot of a road, honestly, you probably can't even really park there. I mean, even if you pulled it all the way over, you're probably blocking a bit of this drive still. So that's one of the things that gets me. And then if you start walking this direction, if you look to the left here, this is what's called an experimental station owned by DuPont, which is a chemical and products company. And there's a big entry gate over here. It looks like it's secured and locked up. There is a way that pedestrians, I don't think pedestrians, but I think employees can walk through this gate. But I'm seeing so much mechanisms here. I'm pretty sure that this is a security checkpoint of some kind as well. And you can see they've got the fence all secured. There's barbed wire along the top. So they're not going to let you go through this way. So if you do park your car there, what have you come to this spot to do? And it's the bridge, right? You're heading for the bridge. And I do believe there's a possibility that her car being put at that place was to maybe put the thought out there that she did come to this particular bridge and jumped in from this particular bridge. I still have problems with that, because knowing that there's obstructions between this and where her body is found, it's obviously not a very good plan if you're trying to get law enforcement off your back and you want to stage this and make it look like she took her own life. So what went wrong about that plan? I don't know. Why is the car parked here where her body is found so far down, and they think that her body was actually put in the water? Obviously, it had to be somewhere south of this. There's just a lot of very serious questions. So here's where the car was parked, the red spot that's marked here. And if you zoom in on the satellite view, you can see like really quickly, you get into problems with a body moving through this body of water. Right here almost looks like a complete break where it's like a rock formation. There's just all kinds of rocks laid out here. And it's kind of a dam, and it's slowing everything down. And you can see that I don't know if there's any particular spot where there is a clear path of travel for something, maybe here kind of on the bottom end, but I can't tell because of all the shadows that are going on with this satellite photo. But you see there's kind of a little drop off in the water that happens here. This kind of object, or this kind of blockage kind of happens again and again as you flow down here. So here, this is obviously some type of man-made break or dam. And right past that, I mean, look at this. This is really, really sticky. You can see how shallow the water is in most locations. Look for a straight path of travel through this. Just the possibility that she could have floated through that, or that a body could navigate through all that and get through it all, I'm really having trouble with. Now, admittedly, different times of the year, maybe this water level changes, and we're looking at one particular time frame. But clearly, it's enough that the investigators are saying the same thing. They're like, no. There's too many problems with that. This path of travel doesn't make sense. You've got different types of footbridges that go on here. Of course, they're going to have posts that might not completely stop a body from traveling. But here's another break in the water, and just look at this. There's so much obstructing the path of travel. I definitely get what they're saying, and we're still not at the location where her body was actually discovered. So Susan's widower, Ben Ledyard, also pleaded for the public's assistance. We're going to learn a little bit more about their relationship. They were married for about 3 years. He had 2 daughters from a previous relationship. She was a stepmother to them. But let's watch his interview together.
Susan was the love of my life, my best friend, my beloved wife. She's so missed. I am so heartbroken. And I would simply reiterate what John asked and what the detectives asked. Just any information, regardless how minimal you may think it is, please pass it on. Our family is so heartbroken, and not having closure about how she passed away, it's been really difficult. So I would just ask your help.
So I think I've been very clear on previous videos. I do my absolute best to not try to be a human lie detector, but I have no doubt several of you out there watched that clip and are saying, crocodile tears, there's no way that was real. If anything, I think we have to consider the possibility that there might have been something that went down at the house. Maybe there's some other aspect to this that we haven't considered when it comes to her husband, at least so far. The problem I have with that is that information that was laid out, that they seem to think that she was still active between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. So if you're talking about something going down at the house, there's some type of attack. He figures, oh my goodness, I need to stage something, make this look like she did it to herself. Let's drive the car. I'm going to park it somewhere. I'm going to get it close to the bridge. We're going to put her in the water and she's going to float down from there. Does that seem like a reasonable staging method for someone that might be trying to hide a crime like this? I believe so. But that fact about her still being active from 3 to 7 doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if their mechanism, like if it is her cell phone and the cell phone is found on her, it doesn't make sense that her husband took the cell phone, ran around with it for 2 or 3 hours, then went to find where her body was and then put it back on her. So there's a lot of strange considerations that I'm having trouble kind of putting together these pieces and saying, okay, it's really looking this way. I mean, look, we all know the stats. The stats certainly point towards significant others pretty heavily in homicides of this nature. At a minimum, someone that actually knows the person is a very, very strong statistical chance. But outside of that, there's even a higher bump for people that are actually intimate with the person. On the flip side of that, is there some possibility that there is someone else that is close to her or that she's intimate with? I think that's another aspect to this that needs to be considered as well. Was she driving out in the middle of the night to meet someone? She knew her husband had gone to bed, that he was going to be out for the night, and she had set up some type of rendezvous. I struggle with that because of where the vehicle winds up. Now, is this a decent spot where she could park her car and then maybe someone comes and picks her up and then they drive off together from there? Possibly. But would you pick a spot where at a minimum you could get ticketed? And maybe she wasn't planning on the car being there that long. I totally understand that. But it still just seems kind of unnecessarily risky for some type of interaction that could alert your husband as to what's going on. I mean, if the car gets ticketed and all of a sudden something's sent in the mail, I don't understand parking the car here if this is a rendezvous situation. So I'm kind of struggling with that. And I'm still bothered a little bit by the proximity that's going on here. So let's say she was going to have this rendezvous with someone. She drives a mile away and then parks her car and then she's picked up by someone. Why even go to that trouble? Why start the car and risk your husband waking up and hearing it? Why not walk out of your neighborhood, go a block down and have the person pick you up from there? That's why I mentioned earlier, intent. Intent in this case is really giving me a tough time in terms of looking at it. The car only being a mile away, if this is a rendezvous situation, being at that type of location is really not lining up. If this is a staging situation, it's making a lot more sense. But let's continue with the details and see what else we can learn. Over at Inquirer.com, just a little bit more about her patterns. The texts that she sent to friends the morning she died were not out of the ordinary, police said, nor was it uncommon for her to stay up late using her phone, they said, or to sometimes go for a walk while it was dark outside. That is another interesting aspect, because when I do look at this location where the car was parked, there's something I noticed on Google Maps here. There is a trail. So if you just park the car, you walk right across the bridge, and then right here, this is a walking trail that kind of goes alongside of the Brandywine Creek and continues and goes all the way through to a street, Brandywine Falls Road, that picks up over here. And that street kind of continues, and you can get to Bancroft Mills Road and stay close to the water from there. So that's the only thing when I read that about, oh, she might like to go for walks at night. I'm wondering, is this a familiar place? What's interesting is her house is actually south of here. So wouldn't it have made more sense for her to park somewhere around here and then walk up to where the trail is and walk from there? Why did she overshoot the trail to park at a place where you can't really park, where down here we've got a bunch of services? And quite honestly, the trail is only a mile from her house. I mean, that's, 15 minutes or 20 minutes for her to walk to get to the point where the trail is. Why take the car at all? So the going for a walk thing, I kind of find interesting, only because in particular we have this trail here. But back to that conversation about potentially a staging situation. Look at this trail. I mean, it is thick. There's just dense coverage. Let's do the walk real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll just jump across the bridge. And unfortunately, they don't have the whole trail mapped out here in Google Maps, but you can just see this kind of bike and walking trail that kicks off of the road here. And it's coverage. I imagine at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, it's probably completely black out here. You probably can't see a thing. And if this is a staging situation where someone is parking the car there and then deciding that that's not a good spot to drop her in, that they need to get her further down the river, did they walk across the bridge, hit this trail, and carry her to a different position down there? But up till this point, we don't have any announcements that they're investigating a homicide. All they've said is they don't think that she ended her own life. Well, that actually changes fairly quickly here. Starting around October, over at DelawareOnline.com, Susan Ledyard's family says her death may be homicide. Who did this to her and why? Ledyard's sister, Meg Morrisey Heineke, said, her voice beginning to shake. We have to wake up every day and go to bed every night missing her, haunted by what might have happened in her final hours. The family started posting flyers with Ledyard's pictures and ways to submit tips. They intend to post 1,000 flyers along the river. Susan's life meant something, and she deserves better, her sister Heineke said. Detectives who watched surveillance footage from the area said in September they saw Ledyard's headlights turn off, but said it was too dark to determine if anyone got into or out of the car. That's one thing that the investigators are being very clear about in terms of the time frame they've put together for her. Her car leaves home, goes right to that location, and then they have this surveillance footage that they see her car pull up at that spot, and all they can tell are the headlights are turned off. They can't tell if anyone gets out. They can't tell if anyone gets in. But there's also another assumption that I think we can make from this. No one is mentioning that, hey, another vehicle came up and parked right next to the car. If they were to have that information, I'm almost certain they would actually release that, and probably with the description of what type of vehicle we're looking for. We're not getting that either. So what does this mean? I don't know. Is this really that she parks it there, she gets out of the car and decides that she's going to go for this walk or something along those lines, and then something bad happens after that? It's another possibility that I think we have to consider as well. So we get another update from the Delaware State Police on November 14th, 2019. The Delaware Division of Forensic Science has officially classified the death of 50-year-old Susan M. Ledyard of Wilmington as a homicide due to blunt force trauma and drowning. So this is where things get even trickier for me trying to understand this. We don't have a cause of death that is blunt force trauma, and then they know for a fact that she was deceased before she went into the water, because they'd be able to tell that, there's no water in her lungs. There's several different indicators where they could tell, okay, drowning was not a component of this. Here they're saying it was. So this almost sounds like a situation where the blunt force trauma could have happened at one period of time, maybe had incapacitated her, but maybe didn't actually take her life. And then the act of trying to stage this and put her in the river, that's what essentially took her life. If she was unconscious, let's say, and someone threw her in the river, then all of a sudden she had, she had all the pieces for the drowning as well. So it's interesting to me that we're seeing kind of this, these dueling items in terms of what actually took her life. A lot of times we'll see it drilled down to one specific thing, blunt force trauma. We know that she didn't drown, or drowning, but there was other trauma that had occurred. It's interesting because here they're saying it's due to blunt force trauma and drowning. And there's an aspect of me that's still asking about, well, could this have been a situation where, her family was worried it was an accident from very early on. So like a fall from a high spot onto an area where maybe it was assumed that there was water, but we saw that there's a lot of areas of that creek where there's rocks that are just jagged and poking all through the water. Could there still be some element of this being an accident of some kind? It's hard to tell without, seeing the reports for myself. But what's clear is the information that Delaware State Police is getting and that they're putting out there is, in their mind, and with the information that they got from the Delaware Division of Forensic Science, there's no question this has been labeled. It is indeed a homicide. So that has to lead me to believe that they're recognizing something about the blunt force trauma. Maybe they know what type of object made it. Maybe the location of the blunt force trauma doesn't make sense for a type of accidental or fall situation or something along those lines. And they still don't back off of the statement that they've got some information that is telling us that between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., she's still active. And what is that information? Where is it coming from? Here at dailylocal.com, we get someone that kind of puts that question directly to them. Grassy said Ledyard was active during that time frame, and when asked if it was determined by pulling her cellular data, he said it was through different investigative measures taken over the past 6 weeks is what we've been able to determine. So kind of the same assumption I was going with, well, it's got to be cell phone information, and they're just seeing the cell phone move around. Couldn't that be that someone else has it, or maybe even that it's in the water with her and it's not shorting out for some reason? No, it seems like it's not related to cellular information. There's something else going on with this information that's telling them she was active from 3 to 7. So with that, it just keeps pushing the possibility of this being a domestic violence related issue, some type of staged cover up based off that. It keeps pushing that into a realm of not really being possible in my mind. Let's continue and see what else we could learn. DelawareOnline.com. This is an article from November of 2019. Days after Susan Ledyard's death was officially ruled a homicide, her family once again gathered to call anyone with information to action. "You're devastated," said Jack Morrisey, Ledyard's father. "Somebody out there killed her now. That's a pretty tough thing to handle." Her parents, at least as of the articles I'm seeing, are still alive. They're in their 80s, and I'm really hoping that these answers come to them, that they're able to know what happened to their daughter before they're no longer with the family as well. But once again, this is another effort. The family gets together. They take more posters out. I have to say they've just done a really good job of engaging media when they have events like this, and the media has done a good job of supporting them as well in these efforts. There's not a ton of information about this case. We have really a few pieces that we've been discussing in all these articles over and over, but as the articles go on, fidelity of the information gets a little better. It gets a little better each time, and I'm still wondering, from the family's perspective, do they think there's a possibility that this might be related to her husband, or maybe the other thought that she had met up with someone she was having a relationship with or something like that? Let's listen to a comment from her sister.
Knowing that she died at the hands of someone she may have known and trusted, is devastating.
Seems like at least the time of that interview that her sister is still considering the possibility. And I don't know how you couldn't. I mean, like I mentioned, if you look into the statistics on homicide of women, there's a very clear trend that's happening there. The fact that this is probably someone that knew her very well is a very, very strong possibility. But is the sister referring to her husband in that clip, or talking about someone she might have been meeting up with in the middle of the night? I don't know. Let's continue with another article over at NBCnews.com. And as we get to the 1 year I hate calling it even an anniversary, but the 1 year time frame after her death, I really appreciate that the detectives actually do start introducing some new information. And I think it works very well because, first of all, look at the coverage we're talking about. We were pretty much all local papers, and now all of a sudden we're hitting NBC News. We've got People.com coming up after this. The coverage is kind of hitting a different level at this point, and I do think it's because they're doing a good job appropriately, not just controlling the information for the integrity of the investigation, but then kind of prompting, hey, we need a new push in media. Let's release a little something. Let's do another press conference. I think they've got a really good handle on that. According to Detective Dan Grassi with the Delaware State Police, a construction worker who has not been named was at the job site near the Brandywine River when he spotted Susan's body around 7:30 a.m. on July 23rd. So we now know it's a construction worker that actually spots her in the water. Comments that he made to the family say that her body actually got caught up in some branches that were close to the creek, but he thought that that was actually a good thing because continuing south from there, Brandywine gets considerably wider, not nearly as many obstructions, and it leads right out to the Christina River, and then it's a very short ride in the Christina River all the way out to the Delaware. So there could have been a really good chance that they didn't find her at all if it wasn't for that and the construction worker that found her. But there's one other thing about all this. Keep in mind this time frame that they're telling us about her still being active from 3 to 7. So how close did she die to when he found her? He found her at 7:30. So was she literally attacked near the side of the water? Someone pushed her in the water and ran off, and then 20, 30 minutes later, this construction worker sees her. And this is going on a Tuesday morning. We're now talking in the 6 to 7 a.m. range when people are out and about and starting their days and going to work. I don't know. I'm still really struggling with this she was active from 3 to 7 comment, but we'll learn more as we go through this. A little over an hour later, at 8:54, troopers responded to a call about a suspicious vehicle blocking the road at 1 Walker's Mill Road. It was a 2016 Honda Civic registered to Susan Ledyard. Just a mile away from the bridge, her husband, Ben, was awoken at their home on Riverview Avenue by banging at the door shortly after 9 a.m. Ben and Susan had only been married for 3 years, but their families knew each other from when Susan, her sisters Megan, Missy, and brother John attended school with Ben at Upland Country Day School in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Ben and Susan reconnected 7 years ago at a memorial service for a mutual friend. Coincidentally, it was held at the Brandywine Brewing Company, which is where her family had all of their gatherings trying to promote the information about her murder. Ben told Dateline that their short time together were the best years of his life. They traveled, went hiking, and enjoyed attending concerts. As a matter of fact, they were supposed to go to a concert the following night. Susan's husband, Ben, told Dateline he had gone to see a movie with a friend around 8 p.m. on Monday, July 29th, 2019. When he got home, he said Susan was on the back porch drinking wine and texting on her phone. We had tickets to the Rolling Stones the next night, Ben said, so I told her we should take it easy, not stay up late that night, and then I went to bed. It was probably around 11 p.m. She told me she'd be in soon. I never saw her again after that. I just have no clue why she left the house that late, Susan's husband Ben said. I was hoping she took Ambien and was just sleepwalking, or maybe she decided to get cigarettes, but then I was afraid she was going to meet someone, that she had been seeing someone, and that breaks my heart. Apparently, she did some extremely light smoking. She was the type of person that just on an occasional night would want to go outside and have a cigarette. Her sisters say that she wasn't the type that would absolutely be fiending for a cigarette and have to go buy a pack at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they don't think that that's really a motivation in her leaving the home. And even with his statement here about her going to meet someone, I'm telling you guys, the placement of the car, just for me personally, it's not supporting that at all. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to take my car a mile away and then you come pick me up. Why? I'm going to walk out the front door. I'm going to go down a block and then you pick me up from there. Makes sense. Or I'm going to get close to your house or something like that. And I guess that's the one possibility. If the person lived in that immediate vicinity and she parked there, but still, I'm telling you, the risk of parking in a spot like that, it doesn't look like it's very well thought out. Over at people.com, Ledyard's older sister, Missy Morrisey, says she texted with her sister that evening. I can tell you that her texts were perfectly plain, she tells People. Nothing significant about them. Morrisey says they were texting about a Facebook friend of Ledyard's and one of her former roommates who she thought may have recently appeared on the news. She had been messaging us all day, she says. Does this look like my former roommate? Her last text to her sister was 12:29 a.m. Ledyard texted and called friends up until 2:47 in the early morning hours. You know, if we try to fit that in, I mean, this time frame is just so tight. She's texting and calling friends. Last contact is at 2:47. I think by 3:02, her car is being parked. I can't imagine. I don't know if something really happened in the home that is tied to this or not. It's still, and then of course we've got this 3 to 7 thing. What's the 3 to 7 thing? Why do they think that? Well, thankfully, we finally get the answer. Based on the Fitbit she was wearing, police and family members know Ledyard was alive between the hours of 3 and 7. They know how many steps she took, but they also know she had a pulse, said Heineke. She had a heart rate up until 7. Heineke says the steps added up to less than a mile. In other words, if her body is 3 miles from her car, she didn't walk that far, she says. And how far she traveled in the river, of course, we don't know, but the steps didn't add up to 3 miles or even close to 3 miles. That is really interesting information, and I really wish the family had full access to the Fitbit data. I don't think they do. There's other aspects. I mean, obviously, this is a Fitbit that has a heart rate monitor in it, so they know her heart is beating through this period of time. I wonder if they could tell if it's lower than usual, if this is that situation that I was talking about where maybe there was an attack, but she actually didn't expire at that point. Also, if there was any rise in her heart rate at a particular time. If she was conscious and this was going on and someone kidnaps her or she starts running away to try to escape something, that should also show in the heart rate data. So there's obviously a lot more information that could come from this Fitbit, but this point in itself is pretty interesting. Her steps are adding up to less than a mile. Just think about, okay, we've got her at 3 o'clock in the morning. She drives 1 mile away for some reason. She gets to that spot and then she walks for a mile. Then somehow hours later is found in the river, but she was still alive up until 30 minutes before she was found. There's still pieces of this that aren't working really well for me and they're not making a lot of sense. On July 23rd, the anniversary of the discovery of her body, family members are planning to visit the location of where her car was found and also visit where she was found. It'll be sort of a way to honor her, says Heineke. We just want closure for the family. We want justice. She deserves a lot better, an ally. And we are 100% committed to keep talking, keep pressuring, shouting it from the rooftops at every opportunity. Around the 1-year anniversary, we also have the detective speak up. This is from WDEL.com. Detective Daniel Grassi is hopeful the 1-year anniversary of Ledyard's death might spark someone's memory about a detail relevant to the case. The big thing we're doing is trying to jog people's memories that maybe they saw the car, a person, something that maybe didn't seem significant to them at the time, but now, over the course of a year, they get familiar with the case. Maybe it jogs their memory and with something that can help us out. And if they're following the pattern that I think they're following, I think we're going to see more information about this. I really hope and pray it doesn't go another year for this family's sake. But if it does, I have a feeling that Detective Grassi is going to have some more information in a year about this. And maybe it'll be more information based off the Fitbit. So a year into this, are there any suspects? Over at philadelphia.cbslocal.com, we get a comment from her brother, John. There have been people of interest, but there has not been anybody who has risen to the level of a suspect. I love my sister so much. She was the coolest kid around. I thought she was the coolest person in the world. Even though the fitness tracker has given us that information, we feel there's more information that Fitbit can give us about more details about what happened during those 4 hours. So I looked into some more information, just trying to learn more about what else might be tracked with that. Some Fitbits also have altimeters, so they can see how high someone has gone. I actually went looking for kind of high spots close to the river. I just wanted to see if there was a possibility that could have been the trauma that occurred to her body if she had fallen from a particularly high place. And there are some buildings that are extremely tall that are close to the river. I don't know if that's really feasible. Once again, I'm trying to share the best info I can with you guys, but without the coroner information or the medical examiner's information, it's hard to know if that's really feasible or not. Of course, Fitbits have internal memory, so that's how they were able to recover all that. Battery life, at least according to this article, is saying it's estimated at about 3 days. I think this article's a little bit old. It's not waterproof, says this article. And they have a 3-dimensional accelerometer system tracking motion as well as the intensity of that motion. I'm assuming this is probably a more modern Fitbit, probably one that she wears on her wrist. So I don't know if the kind of the direction of the accelerometer might be telling. For example, if she walked normally, I think there's a certain pattern that you would see with the accelerometer of her swinging her arm. If someone is carried, there might be different sensors in the accelerometer that are triggered as the person is walking. And that's something that I can't shake looking at this case. We don't know that she walked a mile. We know her Fitbit went a mile and in a walking pattern. That doesn't necessarily mean that she was walking. Now, I don't think it's reasonable to take that as far as, well, maybe someone took off her Fitbit and they took it on and it's their heart rate that's being tracked. I don't think that's reasonable. I think that's too far out there. And then what, they put it back on her and then threw her in the water. But her heart rate's still active until 7. So none of that really makes sense. What makes more sense to me is maybe she was incapacitated, but she hadn't expired yet. Maybe someone carried her to a particular place and then put her in the water from there. And maybe she didn't drown immediately after being put into the water. Now, more current information from Fitbit themselves say that all of their current trackers and smartwatches are water resistant. Not all of them are completely waterproof. Some of them are. Some are swim proof, like in a lake, pool, or ocean. And we don't really know what model she has in particular. But clearly, if they're tracking that information till 7, this is a model that's at least water resistant. And maybe at that point, the water resistance gave up and the device actually got wet. I don't know. We don't have the details of what status the device was in or even what model it was to know for sure. But there's definitely, the brother's making a great point. There is more information they can get from Fitbit. And I don't know if that information has been turned over to the authorities, but maybe Fitbit isn't giving it directly to the family or something along those lines. Let's continue with just a little more information at myarclemis.com. Her car was found parked on Walker's Mill Road. Susan's purse and phone were inside. And if I remember the earlier reports correctly, her car was found unlocked with her purse and phone still inside. Not really making a ton of sense to me. Now the rendezvous situation, let's say that she was going to meet up with someone, leaving your phone behind, maybe if you don't want to be tracked, you're worried that your husband has a tracker on your phone or something like that. That might be possible. Leaving your purse behind, it's 3:00 in the morning. What are you going to use your purse for? But then leaving it unlocked in a car that's not really legally parked doesn't make a lot of sense for me at all. So the rendezvous situation, I'm really not sure of. So obviously without the cell phone, we don't have GPS data. The Fitbits, I think there's a few models that might have GPSs, but the majority of them don't. So what I decided to do was draw a map from kind of the only place that makes sense for where this car is parked. If you are parking there, going for a walk, let's say, or in that situation where if you're trying to stage something that's going on here, you park the car, you head across the bridge, You hit the cover of that dark and pretty secluded walk. And if you go for a mile there, you get to the street that I had told you guys about. That's, I don't know how private this is. I don't know if there's cameras back here. I don't know if any of that could be checked or has been checked by authorities. But if we just kind of walk it out all the way to a mile, we get to this spot, which kind of looks like an industrial area and actually looks like it also has its own bridge. And it looks like, I don't know if that's a rail bridge or a foot bridge. It looks like it's probably a foot bridge that goes across the water. And this is about where 1 mile actually peters out, just about exactly at this bridge. Now, going from south of this location, there's still some dams that happen. We still have some rock patterns that happen. But you can see the water flow on this looks a bit stronger than the previous ones that we looked at. But there's some really big obstacles. Is there a possibility that someone brought her already unconscious to this particular location, to this footbridge, and that is the entry point into the water, and that her heart is still beating at this point? That's kind of the question that I'm stuck with at the end of all this. There is a Facebook page that you can follow for more updates on this case. It is What Happened to Susan, and I'll have a link to it in the description box below. As the end of the school year is just weeks away, we can't help but think of how Susan would be working with her students, trying to make the best of remote learning. Her work was so important to her, and she would be needed now more than ever. The fight to find Susan's killer continues. We will not stop until we get the resolution she deserves. And of course, we have contact information in the description box below. If you're the person with the details, please call them in and help this family find the answers that they're looking for. When we read the obituary, we did mention the ACLU, the Delaware Vision in particular. For nearly 100 years, the ACLU has worked in courts, legislatures, and communities to protect the constitutional rights of all people. Beyond one person, party, or side, we, the people, dare to create a more perfect union. The mission of the ACLU of Delaware is to preserve and advance civil liberties and civil rights in the state of Delaware through education and advocacy without consideration of political association. On behalf of myself and my amazing supporters on PayPal and Patreon, in Susan's honor, we have already made a donation to the ACLU of Delaware, and I appreciate you guys so much for enabling me to do that. Before I end today's video, let's thank some of the people that make donations like that possible. We have several new patrons, starting with Brittany Berg, Joshua Smith, and Lita Andreyevna. Also, a big thank you to Candy Murphy Bishop for increasing her pledge. I really appreciate you guys. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit www.lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here, helping these families, and doing it with limited commercials. You'll notice we never let YouTube inject commercials in these presentations, and sometimes, like I'm guessing on today's video, we can't run ads at all because we need to be able to talk about these things frankly. So I appreciate your support in helping me do that. To Susan's family, I feel for you guys so much. If there's anything that you think that we can do for you, please reach out to me. I can be emailed at john@lordandarts.com, and I truly hope that you guys find justice very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. I'll be back with a new episode of Case Cracked on Monday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.